place to end it. Vaush, I have a special gift for you.
I love gifts.
Ask Yourself is here. He wants to talk to you, so I'm going to unmute him.
Oh, no. Ask Yourself, man. I love you. All right. Hit me with it.
He's unmuted, but he's muted himself. So, but I know he's dying to talk to you.
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
I don't think he's there at the moment.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there he is. Ask Yourself?
Hey, you really react like that when you hear that it's me, Vaush?
No, only when I hear it's a vegan. I actually quite like you.
That's a contradiction. I am a vegan.
Well, it's not.
I like personal. You too. I'm. All right. Well, I mean, I guess that's obvious why I'm here. So, I just want your take on this reply to your argument. So, what I brought up was name the trait, and you basically just bit the bullet, and you said that if there was an LGBT Holocaust happening, it would be fine to buy the corpses of these people, like the breasts of a lesbian or, you know, the steak of a trans person. So I think that right there, I mean, I'm sure you probably agree, you lose like a huge quantity of people.
Yeah, because those people should be vegans, is what they should be.
Right.
Again,
That's just the starting point. Yeah.
I don't disagree with your idea that that it's horrific what we do with purchasing meat. I disagree with the idea that we should very hypocritically focus our moral condemnation only on people who buy meat and dairy products and not on the people who make other purchases that negatively impact the world. That's my main contention. If we had a world where we had a socialist revolution and all commodity goods were purchased and produced ethically, then I would 100% be on board with your argument, morally condemning anyone who buys meat or whatever. My problem is that people get really fucking ass-pained about the meat thing, but then when it comes to buying clothing that was made from sweatshops when you could pay $1 more to get something ethically sourced, oh, well, whatever. Everyone needs a t-shirt. Everyone needs a phone. There's no getting around that. No big deal. When we're contributing to a system that keeps literally like billions of people in poverty. That's the hypocrisy that really, really fucking bothers me.
Okay. Well, either way, when we got to the end of our discussion, we were kind of getting to a stage that we were like getting a sort of an argument like clarified. And part of your argument was this implication that if we shouldn't buy meat produced through capitalism, we shouldn't buy any commodities produced through capitalism. So I was kind of like asking what the reasoning is for that, and we got cut short, understandably, because, you know, you'd been streaming for a bunch of hours. But afterwards, obviously, I formalized your argument. I got you to sign off on it. So we just have this basic kind of modus ponens where we say, I guess it's modus tollens. So if we say, if we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism, then we oughtn't buy any commodity produced through capitalism. It's not the case that we oughtn't buy any commodity produced through capitalism. Therefore, it's not the case that we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism. So I have a counter argument to that, and I'm just curious, as we walk through the premises, if you will accept this argument. So, all right. And obviously we understand validity and soundness. Validity, if the form is correct, then if you accept the premises, you're committed to the conclusion. And then soundness is that the premises are true.
Yeah, I mean, we can run our way through the conclusion, and if I feel like the conclusion doesn't adequately reflect what the premises are, then I might take issue with how the premises are phrased. But yeah,
right. It's formalized though, so you'd have to reject one of the premises to get away from the conclusion.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Cool. So the first premise is if avoiding meat produced through capitalism sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism. Do you agree with that?
If avoiding purchasing meat through capitalism maximizes well-being, then we not do so?
Sufficiently maximizes well-being in case you have a threshold view. Yeah.
What do we mean by oughtn't? Do we mean morally or like legally?
Just morally, yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think that people have moral obligations to maximize the well-being of others.
Wait, I thought you were a rule utilitarian.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean I feel I have an obligation. If I like walk down the street and see a homeless person who needs money, like I don't think that I have a moral obligation to give them my money.
Wait, but do you think that there's anything that we oughtn't do?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't. I think that there are general thresholds of acceptable behavior that are usually conditioned through like social circumstance. Like here, like for example, this is a pretty common counter argument that's made that I'm heard. If you're walking down the
Sorry, I'm just on a train. They just want my ticket. Please continue. Yeah.
Gotcha. If you're walking down the street and you see a baby that's drowning in a fountain, and you could rescue that baby, but it would like ruin your socks or something. Like you've got like $5 socks on or whatever, it'd fuck up your socks. Basically, everyone would agree to sacrifice their socks to save that kid. Like everyone would. It'd be ridiculous not to. You'd call anyone who didn't a sociopath. However, for $5, you can save a life if you donate it to the right charity. If you donate it to the right charity, that's enough water purification tablets or food or clothing or whatever, probably to save a life in some sufficiently impoverished part of the country. But I wouldn't call a person a sociopath for refraining from doing that. I think moral obligation is a really, really tricky thing. And while I would always advocate for somebody to go ahead and donate the $5 to Africa or whatever, I would never say a person is bad for not doing it.
Oh, this is so bad. My headphone battery is low, so if I disappear, that is why. But I really hope we can get through this. So, okay, now if you're a rule utilitarian, like you're still a rule utilitarian, right?
It was pointed out to me that rule utilitarianism is redundant, and I am now reduced back to a lowly act utilitarianism because the consequences that are made of the rule fit within the act of an action. So I have been disciplined.
Right, yeah, so that's, I mean, I was just going to run it with rule util, but like that's obviously the classic criticism that just collapses back into act utilitarianism, because once we get rid of the well, in fact, we don't even need to go into it. But once you
if you go too hard with the rule making, you're basically falling back into deontology. And if you're reducing the rule to a specific subset within the purview of the act's consequences itself, then you're just doing fancy act utilitarianism.
Yeah, like if you say like you shouldn't like rape someone even if it maximizes well-being, because generally speaking rape doesn't maximize well-being, all you need to do is dial in the specifics and say, okay, well, we know no one ever finds out this doesn't lead to any kind of global decrease in well-being. It is a one-off incident. And at that point, you're just going to have to collapse back into act utilitarianism or become a deontology. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we agree on that. So that's fine. This argument will still run on act utilitarianism.
Yeah, I believe all the same things. I just different. Yeah.
Yep. No. That's fine. I like that you adjust your position as you see things that don't make sense. A lot of people don't do that, so I think it's good. But either way, the point is that there's some kind of threshold, obviously, where you say that's something that you oughtn't do, and you just gave an example of it. So you'd grant that there's a threshold, surely. Like it's not okay for me to go like kill an old lady and like teabag her in the street or something. Like, do we?
I would always advocate a
that?
person work to maximize well-being, but there's a different set of standards I would apply to calling a person immoral for not doing so. That's my main contention.
Right. Okay, but just straightforwardly though, there is some kind of threshold of, I guess, presumably suffering, unless you're a preference utilitarian, where you say that's wrong. That's something you oughtn't do.
Yeah, or I would say you oughtn't do anything that doesn't maximize well-being, but I would morally condemn someone for doing something actively harmful. There's obviously a lot of like vagueness there. I mean, do you morally condemn someone for deciding like to split up with the mother, even though you've got a kid to take care of, but you and your mom argue a lot? There's whether or not you should always do what maximizes well-being, but I don't know if I can call you a bad person for not. But
there is surely some threshold beyond which you're going to say you are doing something wrong. You oughtn't do that.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But that's a very fuzzy line for me. And in global capitalism, where all of our commodity purchases, or at least almost all of them, hurt people, I have a very difficult time assigning immorality to a person's decision to buy meat or dairy products when everything else we buy is sort of tainted with that process.
Well, look, you don't even have to like push back on these by making some kind of point about veganism, because like where I'm going with the argument, right? It's not like there's some hidden gotcha here. The conclusion is about veganism.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with the premise. We ought be vegan. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Well, but that's not the premise. So just to be clear, so the premise is just that. Right. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize. I thought you were referring to the premise. My bad.
No, I mean that would be, I assume, your conclusion. I mean, considering that you're a vegan and advocate for it, I believe we ought be vegans.
Well, it's not quite the conclusion. The conclusion is actually just that the first premise of your argument is false. But let's just continue through it. So obviously this, you can just put in anything here. If anything sufficiently maximizes well-being, then that's something we should do, right? So if we say that avoiding meat produced through capitalism if avoiding meat, this is an if statement, right? It's not an assertion that it does, it's an if statement. If it sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism. You could just replace it with anything. If doing X sufficiently maximizes well-being, then that's something that you're going to want to do. Whatever sufficient is to you.
Yeah,
You can have a fuzzy threshold all you want. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Ought to. Yeah, but I don't know if I'd morally condemn a person for not doing so.
Wait, but there's some threshold beyond which you do condemn people, right?
Yes,
like,
again,
but
the threshold for condemnation is not one mote smaller than the threshold for like what I would advocate for. It's not like maximize all utility or you're a bad person. What makes you a bad person is much more contextual, I think.
That's all fine. But the point is just that there is, even if you say there's one threshold for what we ought to do, there's another for when you're actually a horrible person for not doing it. That's all fine. The point is there's some threshold beyond which you're just going to say you're wrong. You shouldn't do that.
I would agree.
Right. So we can agree with so we agree on the first premise then. If avoiding meat sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we ought avoid meat. Or then, if I read it exactly, if avoiding meat produced through capitalism sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism.
I don't believe socialist meat would be much better in mind. I mean, the only ethical meat you could really have, right, would be like if the animal fucking like died of old age, happy on the meadows, and then you immediately scoop it up. Like, I don't know.
This is just I could make some separate argument about socialism, but like this is just, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's through capitalism or whatever. The point is just, on your view, this is just what you're committed to as a utilitarian. Like, there's
yes, I agree with that premise. So long as we recognize that what we ought to does not necessarily denote the boundary at below which we are immoral for not doing.
Well, I can replace the wording then. If you want me to replace it by ought, we can say that it would be immoral. So if we say, I can just change the wording. If avoiding meat produced through capitalism sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we'd be immoral not to avoid buying meat produced through capitalism.
No, I strongly disagree with that. I think that it's perfectly moral to
that's a contradiction. Okay, wait, but there you did just contradict yourself, because you said that there's a threshold beyond which it's immoral, and now you're saying there's not.
Yeah, but it's not at buying meat or buying anything.
No, but it's an implication, right? P implies Q, so it's if it sufficiently maximizes well-being, then it's something that we'd be immoral not to do.
But I don't think that applies to commodity purchases. I don't think there's any circumstance by which buying meat would trick that immorality.
Wait, but I didn't yet make the statement that it is the case. This is just the implication that if it's the case that it sufficiently maximizes well-being, then it's the case that we'd be immoral not to do it.
No, I don't think I could agree with that. I think that
that's contradiction.
Because I think that the whether or not we ought to do something correlates to the utility we derive from it, but whether or not we're immoral for not doing it or for doing a bad thing, I think is much it's much more complicated, and it doesn't correlate specifically to the utility of the action.
Wait, but so a minute ago, so there's a contradiction there. So I don't think it's like okay. So the contradiction is that a minute ago you said there's some threshold of negative utility beyond which you would say one is immoral for not doing or for doing an action. Now you're saying that's not the case. So that's a contradiction. That's
that is true, but I don't think. Okay. Here, repeat the syllogism to me then.
Yep. Well,
not the syllogism, the premise.
Yeah, just the premise. Correct. Yeah. So it's if avoiding meat produced through capitalism sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we'd be immoral not to avoid buying meat produced through capitalism.
Yeah, I disagree with that. Those two don't perfectly correlate. Just because I believe there are two separate thresholds, one at which something is desirable and one at which something is immoral, doesn't mean I necessarily believe that if something is good enough to do, that avoiding doing it is bad.
So wait, you are contradicting yourself right now. So a moment ago, what you said is that there's some threshold of negative utility beyond which you'd condemn one for being immoral for doing a given action. Now you're saying that's not the case. That is P and not P. Okay, so I mean, you have to pick your poison there.
Wait, no. What you're saying in the premise is that if you gain enough utility by avoiding eating meat, then therefore to continue to eat meat in spite of that would be immoral, correct?
Oh, my headphones died. Sorry, now I have to switch over to the phone mode. You're gonna get out of having this argument run on you because I need to get off this phone.
That's the goal, baby.
Run out the timer. Okay, well we'll just try to get through the one premise, then I'll go. So the only point is, sorry, I didn't hear what you said because my headphones died. Did you want to repeat that?
All I want to say is, so what I agree with is that there are two thresholds. One is of maximizing utility, and we should always strive for that. And one of them is either by not doing a good or by doing a bad, the negative utility is sufficient enough to constitute an immoral action. And
Correct.
the premise you're putting forth here is that if the avoiding meat produces a sufficient amount of utility, it would be immoral not to do so. Yeah, I don't agree with that because the threshold at which something becomes immoral is not a set distance below the potential utility gained by doing something good. Even if you could potentially get infinite utility out of avoiding doing something, that doesn't necessarily mean I would feel comfortable saying that it is immoral to avoid doing that. You're setting the threshold here as it relates to the potential utility of avoiding eating meat, but I disagree with the relationship between the two thresholds.
Well, wait, okay, so I'm worried about ruining the AMA with all these Toronto noises, and I'm gonna have to get off the phone. But I'll just make a quick point, and you can have the last word, and
We can probably talk in the future too. I mean, we have each other's numbers.
Well, I'm happy to. I want to talk to Hassan too. It's really not a gotcha. I just think that there's a lot of leftists who are conservative about this topic, and it's really weird. So
I feel like I'm adhering to a very principled ethical stance here, but
well, wait. So I'll just make one last point, and you can have the last word. So all I'm saying is that you've contradicted yourself here. So before you said that it's the case that if something causes sufficiently negative utility, then one would be immoral not to do it. Now I understand that there's a lesser threshold where it's just something that would be nice to avoid. What the fuck is this? Sorry, my phone, sorry. So I understand that there's some lower threshold where you say this is just a good thing to avoid doing, but you've also stated that there's some threshold where the thing is sufficiently where the thing is sufficiently negative for utility that it would actually be immoral to do it. Now you're saying that it's not the case that such a threshold exists, so that is a contradiction. But I'll give you the last word, and it's good talking to you as per usual.
Right, and hopefully we'll do it again in the future. The distinction here is that in the argument that I am making, which is that there is a threshold for immorality, you can either do something bad enough or avoid doing something good enough for something to constitute an immoral action. I agree with that. However, in the premise, the problem is when you say utility gained by not eating meat is so sufficient that to avoid to continue eating meat would be an immoral action. The problem is that on a categorical level, I do not believe there is any way for the consumption of a commodity to be so unethical, or that we could gain so much utility from not getting it that we can comfortably call a person unethical for participating in the production or the consumption of that commodity. So in the instance of meat eating, for example, if I were to avoid eating meat, utility would be gained from that, unquestionably. Like, I wouldn't deny that. However, I could gain utility from doing a fuck ton of stuff that I don't do, and nobody calls me immoral for not doing it. So unless we could contrive some scenario in which me refraining from eating meat would single-handedly spare like the lives of every animal in every factory farm on earth, or some impossibly high standard of potential utility for me to avoid eating meat, maybe yes, I could concede that. But I take issue with the implication of the argument that the amount of utility gained from avoiding eating meat could possibly mean that continuing to do so would constitute an immoral action.
Awesome. Thank